Hi. I'm a little out of it today, but I'm going to get to my library picture book haul for this week. Starting, as always, from my least favorite, going up to my most favorite. Not a lot of super big things to say about these books. I'm starting to think maybe I should just review the books from my haul each week that I have something especially to say about. Just leave out maybe the neutrals. Just do the ones that I particularly like or dislike. Because I feel like there's a lot of books in the middle there sometimes. I'm either I don't know what to say about this, or I come up with something to say about it, but why? I don't really need to because I don't have much to say about it. I don't really care about the book. Anyways, moving on. So this is my least favorite this week. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. It's called Almost a Full Moon by Hawksley Workman, illustrated by Jensine Ekwall. What a name. Lensine or Jensine? Cannot tell. It's all in a weird... Oh, it is Jensine. Okay. This book is sort of mildly storyless, and I think that's the main reason that I dislike it. The illustrations are not really my sort of thing, but they just kind of are blah to me too. I just don't find these character designs compelling is my main issue here. There's some interesting layouts, but it's not enough for me. The colors don't really move me. The lines sometimes are a little bit messy for my taste, so that's just not my thing. It has this repeating refrain throughout it that say, let's make some soup because the weather's turning cold. And that's pretty much all it does. It kind of just shows scenes of families coming together in some rural setting to have a meal together, and they continuously repeat, let's make soup because the weather's getting cold. No one's different and everyone's alone, it says at one point, which I don't really know how to parse that statement. Let's make some soup because everyone feels the cold. I don't know. So it's about inclusiveness. So maybe it's about neighborliness in general, but I got the sense that it was trying to make a sort of statement about I don't know, racial harmony or something. Everybody's, we're not so different kind of a thing. With the sort of diverse cast going on here. If that's what you're gonna make your story about, make it something that's, I don't know, maybe more compelling or feels more grounded in the real world or is based on somebody's experiences maybe. I don't know. Just make it something that grabs the reader more, because this kind of just comes across as this light, let's all get along. This wispy voice that doesn't have much strength to it and doesn't hold one's interest, and that seems a shame considering that it, great message, but I wanted more content. A little cameo here from Adventure Time's Finn and Totoro. So yeah, it's kind of dull. This one is Come to the Fairies Ball by Jane Yolen, illustrated by Gary Lippincott. I have a lot of Jane Yolen books this week, but I'll talk more about that later. For this one, the pictures kind of creeped me out, so that's one of the things that I didn't like about it. It's basically the telling of Cinderella, except for that she doesn't have a fairy godmother and she doesn't lose her shoe at the end. But it's everybody goes to the ball except for the one fairy, and then the one fairy comes to the ball late, and then the prince is "Hey, I fell in love with you." The set design, so to speak, of this book is very reminiscent to me of the Brandy Cinderella movie. I wouldn't be surprised if the illustrator for this book had something to do with the concept art for that film. But it's just kind of a flat, weird fairy tale that's hard to read because it's all in this scripty rhyme, and I didn't particularly care for it. See what I mean? I don't know a lot to say. Poppy, Buttercup, Bluebell, and Dandy by Fiona Woodcock. This book is interesting on paper. It's about these skateboarding flower fairies, so that's kind of fun right off the bat. And they're their meadow town or something has been transformed into a city over the years, and they're decrying the urban state of everything. This book I felt was it kind of didn't work for me, partially because it just didn't catch my interest very much, but but partially because it was a really interesting example of, I talk a lot about people like about the words and pictures working in tandem, that like the words should say some things that the pictures maybe don't, and the picture should say some things that the words don't, and they together should create the full picture. That's kind of like the strength of a good picture book, in my opinion. This book's an interesting example because it has some examples of doing that quite well. For example, there must be a way down there, said Poppy. I'm sure of it, when they're up on the roof. How? Said Buttercup. Quick, grab hold, called Bluebell. This is fun. So, the text doesn't say it. The text provides the narration while the pictures explain that what's going on is they're grabbing a bag to parachute down. Great. Like, that's a good example. That's what I'm talking about. But then a lot of the rest of this, they have stuff like a car's coming their way, and they can just show that in the pictures. But they say, "Whoa, a car!" shouted Poppy. To like, and then she says, "Quick, this way." And I feel like you could have just said, "Quick, this way." Like, you don't need to say what it is. You could have made the picture show what it is. And then another point where it was interesting is, here's a point where it actually did have the text say something, and then the picture say more stuff, so that it fleshed out what the text was. Like, the text didn't give the full picture, and then the picture fleshed it out, which was the good thing, right? Except for in this case, it didn't work because I was confused, because it was actually split over 2 pages. So it says, "We made it," said Poppy. "Can anyone see the park?" But then, "Stop!" cried Poppy. "Now what are we going to do?" said Dandy, who wished they could just go home. And, like, I didn't know what they were talking about, because it doesn't show what they're looking at. They just say stop, and they say, "Now what are we going to do?" And if they had shown that with this picture, where there's a giant slope that they are scared to go down, then I would get that. But I didn't get that until the next page, which I felt was, like, the wrong way to do it. So, mixed bag of examples there, but as far as examples go, I guess there's all 3. So, interesting, but not my type of book, per se. All right, this is The Seeing Stick by Jane Yolen. And here we start, I believe, with my 3 main Jane Yolen books I had today. Man, this Jane Yolen lady sure gets around. She's writing for all these different cultures. I have to look up for a second. Is Jane Yolen Jewish? All right, so Jane Yolen is Jewish. So I've got these 3 stories from Jane Yolen, and I just was interested by this, that so this one, Stone Angel, is about the Nazi occupation of Paris and the Jewish experience during that, which makes sense as a story that Jane Yolen would tell, because according to what I've looked up on the internet, Jane Yolen is Jewish, so that makes sense. But then she also has this story that she's written that is a story of Christopher Columbus's landing and encountering the which people is this? The Taino people. Told from the perspective of a Taino youth. So that's a culture that's not hers. And then we have this other book, The Seeing Stick by Jane Yolen, illustrated by Daniela Jaglenka. You can't give me a name that long and put it in that fancy font. I can't read that. Daniela Jaglenka Terrazzini. This one's illustrated by Katie Mae Green, and this one's illustrated by David Shannon. It's a familiar name. But this one's like supposedly some like Chinese fable. I don't know if it's an authentic Chinese fable. I kind of would guess maybe not, because Jane Yolen is not Chinese and doesn't particularly have a reason to. I don't know. So this book is from 1977. This book is from 1992, and this book, let's see, 2015. So actually, that's even more interesting. It's interesting that these 2 are from long ago, or longer ago, because I feel like they're maybe part of a culture that was more acceptable then, maybe still somewhat acceptable now, but getting less so, of like white people writing from the perspective of other cultures. Like, maybe there's no like pure-blooded Taino people left, but there's some probably descendants of Taino people that could have told this story. Leave it to them. And same with this being a Chinese story, leave it to Chinese people to tell their, fables, whether they're a genuine, authentic, historical fable or not. And that's kind of the attitude of today, but that attitude didn't exist, or rather wasn't being listened to, when these books were made. And so you get this kind of thing where it's like, Jane Yolen was a popular author, and so, let's get Jane Yolen to write all of those. And when we're choosing between, when we're trying to find a story that's about, has some like Native American representation or some Chinese representation, let's go to Jane Yolen. She writes good books, you know what I mean? And that was kind of this. It kind of was a good example to me of how that culture of like not really caring about like who's telling whose stories kind of makes it so that just a few people are telling everybody's stories, as evidenced by this. So all in all, I think that's represented by the fact that this one was the strongest. I felt like there was actual like heart and emotion in this that I didn't feel from these other ones as much, because this one, not because this one was about a Jewish experience by a Jewish author necessarily, but it was better in my opinion. Maybe that's just because she wrote it later in life and she's a more skilled author at this point. But yeah, this book like goes on a bit for me. It's just very long. There's a lot of details, but if you're interested in this very detailed emotional story about a Parisian Jewish family like having to hide in the woods and immigrate to England in order to escape Nazi occupation, then it's not bad. It's like nice and straightforward and dark for a kid's book, and it has a lot of historical details, and it has like a note from the author with history in the back. Not so bad. Where do I put these? Okay, I'm putting them down here. This one, however, it is full of historical details, but they really feel like they were researched, which, anybody would research them. That's not necessarily because she's white, right? It's because it's like from, a culture that isn't around in the same state anymore, I guess you would say. It's a historical thing, so of course you would do some research for it. But nonetheless, it comes across that way. It doesn't come across as this, like, it's told in the first person, so it's supposed to come across like naturally and like conversationally, and it doesn't. It comes across very research papery with like bullet point feeling moments where they list historical details. There's also some like personal moments in there too. It's very strongly demonizing of Christopher Columbus, so that's a positive. But in a way, it almost went too far. It was like in that direction. Like it paints the white people as like really terrifying, creepy people, and this boy is like, "Don't ever trust them," like he somehow knows like what the future of this is going to be, and so. In that, and being written by a white person, it did kind of start to come across as almost self-flagellating, like like a little bit like an overstated apology or a self-pitying apology, I guess is what it is. Almost just it's a very white guilt book, I guess is what I'm saying. A very white guilt book. And also a little bit on the long side, but very dark and very, very, very critical of Christopher Columbus. So not without any merit. I just want to hear these stories told by people whose actual family history is included in these, because this felt like a white person's fantasy about like how evil those white people were. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? And then the seeing stick. Honestly, I know I'm being real social justice warrior-y today, but my main thing with this is it starts right off with this weird statement where this princess has everything in the world and all of these treasures and everything she could ever want, but she can never enjoy them or be happy because she's blind. Yeah, by the end of the story, the fable is sort of about how you can still, like, there's still ways to sense things even if you're blind, but, like, who's going to be reading this and, like, not know that, I guess? Like, first of all, right, like I'm trying to figure out who this is written for, who's the audience, because if it's a blind person, then it kind of feels rude. It's like, oh, like, here's this person who is blind, which was the worst thing in the world. But then they learned that it didn't have to be so bad. And that there's other ways to sense your world. And I feel like if I were a blind person reading this, I'd be like, yeah, I know. You don't have to, like, teach me that and also, like, like, put insult on it at the same time. If I were a not blind person here, then I feel like this book it almost suggests that it has an air of being about or it has an air of being for blind people, even if it's not supposed to be. So I feel like the result for a reader who was not like a non-critical reader who wasn't blind reading this book would, I feel, have an experience. The text suggests that you could have this experience of kind of seeing it as like, oh, wow, I sure do feel bad for blind people. Their lives really do suck a ton, and but like, oh, but there's a way that they could see, like with their other senses. Maybe they should learn that or something, and then like, I don't know, it'd probably take a real idiot to want to go and like teach blind people to touch things after this, because that's the thing of the plot, is that the girl has never touched anything before, and so she finds out that you can touch things to see, and I'm like, who is this revelation for? It just felt weird, and it felt rude to me. Okay. This one's called A Funny Little Bird by Jennifer Yerkes. Here we go into my neutral books. Those are all kind of my negatives. I know that I didn't really say anything negative about the about Stone Angel. I just didn't love it. It was just a little long for me. Not that bad. So I guess maybe that was the start of my neutrals. And here's neutral number 2. I just wanted to say those as a package because they're all Jane Yolen. A Funny Little Bird by Jennifer Yerkes or Yerkes. Not sure how to pronounce that. Yeah, so this is a fine book. It's one of those books that kind of comes across as like maybe it's supposed to have a message, which, you know, I don't like. I felt like there was some metaphor going on here, and I'm real suspicious of metaphors. The art style has this interesting gimmick where the background is white and the bird character has no outlines and is also white, so the bird character blends into the background. And that's on the theme of the story. The story is about a little bird who's kind of invisible to the world, presumably because they're white, but maybe also because they're, you know, quiet or shy, or a metaphor for generally like background people. So the bird wants to like explore, but everybody's ignoring him, and so he picks up the like feathers and other trinkets from everything that's ignoring him, and all the pretty things that he sees in the world, and decorates himself with them, and then he can be seen. Now people will notice him when he gathers that stuff around him, but he became proud and he starts to show off, and so then he also attracts the attention of like unwanted attention of predators, and so he learns to throw away all of the fancy stuff and go back to being invisible, and also help other people hide by standing in front of them. And I was just like, this feels like it has a message, like a metaphorical message for humans, aside from just being a cute little story about birds. And I'm not entirely sure if I like that message, but overall it's a cute enough book, and the art has a nice-ish little twist, and at the end it does say that he doesn't always stay invisible, so there's that. So neutral for me. Okay. This is The Best Sound in the World by Cindy Woom, you gonna say? Could be Cindy Woome, I suppose. Not really sure. The highlight of this book is the illustrations. These are the end pages. Super adorable. And there's a lot of charming details to the writing, too. Roy was a little lion. I like that he's a little lion. It's got a very like Sanrio, but done with like watercolor and like loose ink pen. So there's a really fun. I mean, the illustrations are just so charming, super charming, and a really cute kind of voice to the story as well. The story is about a little lion who lives next door to a lemur in a big bustling city in Africa, and then he can't get any space from his neighbor to play his music, so he ends up going out into the world to collect music, and goes all over these different locations in Africa, to the souk, and to the shore, and to the desert, and collecting sounds in little jars. And then when he comes back home, he finds out that his lemur friend has been following him the whole time, and for some reason that makes him like the lemur. Not really clear on the progression here, but somehow I guess this is a story about an annoying neighbor who just wears this dude down until he accepts that he's never going to be left alone, and they become friends. And then they sell sounds in jars to humans. There's cute aspects of this, and the illustrations are gorgeous. The story was, I don't know, a little stiff and creaky in my opinion. It didn't exactly work for me. But like as a story about friendship, it's a little bit weird. Just like it just felt like a pro-negging book somehow. But cute anyways. This one's called The Granddaughter Necklace by Sharon Dennis Wyeth, illustrated by Bagram. There's a French name. Ibatouine, I'm going to say. Pardon if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. This one is interesting, I guess. So it explains in the back of the book that what this is that this is like roughly based on true history from the author's family. Sharon Dennis Wyeth is a person of at least partial African American descent who has she's like in this book. This book is like a follow up to her having researched her family history and been looking for her matrilineal line, and she was expecting to have a matrilineal line that led her to Africa, but it actually starts somewhere in Ireland. So this is a story about a necklace that she's kind of imagined being passed down among all of those generations of mothers in her family, and the necklace is imaginary, but the people in the story are real, and presumably the stories about them are real too, because she says that her family has a strong oral storytelling tradition. So, it kind of goes backwards in time. So it starts with like, here I am with my mom, here's my mom with her mom, and it tells little stories about each of these each of these mothers, grandmothers, daughters' lives, going back in history until this Irish lady who moves from Ireland to the U.S. and meets a free black man in Virginia way long ago, I guess. I don't know. I just found it's just kind of a very, very personal story, so I found that interesting. Not a huge amount of story to it, but at the same time, it's just so personal and like has all these little details from people's lives from history, and I always kind of like that kind of like stories from history that are true and are not of like the stories of famous people, but are just the stories of like everyday people. So the fact that that's basically what this was made it somewhat interesting to me. This is Our House by Hyeon Yum. This is just a cute book, and again, like kind of light on the story, but kind of cute. There's some pictures that really made me laugh with how adorable they are, like this mother trying to calm the baby, and these two pictures. This one of the baby yelling, I guess, and this one of the baby learning to walk. Look at that little face. So really charming in the illustrations department. It just is saying like, here's all these locations in and around this particular house that her grandparents moved into when they came to America, and then her mother was raised in, and now she lives in, and this is where she lives with her grandparents and her mother. So it's just kind of talking about all these different generations of family through talking about this one location, their steps and their stairway, and the front of their house and the inside of their house and the street in front of it where they all learn to walk, and just kind of connecting the history throughout those generations. So it's very straightforward and simple, but it provides little details. This is the room where they all slept together on cold winter nights, and it's just cute. So I like a good little cute book. This one's called Coming On Home Soon by Jacqueline Woodson, illustrated by E.B. Lewis. This book is quite sad, which I think is the main reason that I wouldn't put it higher than it is, because I did like it. It's well written and everything, but it's just kind of a downer, which, there should be downer books. I'm not a huge person of downer books. Honestly, you know what I like better than anything? Not being into downer books does not mean I'm into happy books. My favorite kids' books are scary ones. I like scary kids' books. Anyway, so this one has some suspense in it, I guess, so there's that. But this one's another like very historically based one. I don't know if it's a true story or not, but it may well be. It's about this girl's mom, who during World War II, I presume, maybe World War One, is going off to work in Chicago because they're short on like they need more like employees because everybody's off, all the men are off at war. So she's going to Chicago and like leaving the family home, which is kind of in the countryside. So she's left with her grandmother, and the girl and her grandmother stay behind. And the story is about them waiting for the mother's letter. She writes letters to the mom, but the mom just doesn't write back until the very end, where she writes back to say that she's coming home. But for some reason, she like doesn't write back the whole time, and it becomes pretty suspenseful for me with like, why isn't she writing back? And it's really sad for the kid. And it's just kind of their daily life while they're waiting for these letters. They find a cat, and the grandmother continuously calls the cat super ugly for some reason. And they just kind of hang out and have their daily lives. There's an interesting style to the writing here. There's a lot of kind of like grammatically clipped sentences, which I feel gives the story a really nice voice. Like how it goes, like, when she put her Sunday dress into the satchel, I held my breath. Period. Tried hard not to cry. Period. Right. So there's like these little short sentences. Tried hard not to cry, like that. So there's a lot of periods that break up the sentences into this kind of like rhythmic speaking style. And then the dialogue is done in italics without quotation marks, which gives it a very like, I don't know, to me when I read that, I read it like I'm hearing it from the next room over. So there's sort of this like somber, chilly quality to that for me when I read it. But that in combination with the rhythm just really kind of gives the sense to me that this is like a very living story, and I'm just like hearing it through the walls next door, which is kind of a cool effect to me. And that may be totally personal, but that's kind of what I got from that. Not a badly written book, but it did kind of, I don't know, it was a chilly book to me. And it takes place in winter, so that may have been intentional. This is Dan Yacharino's Giant Tess. A little pun in the title there. This is a very pun-heavy book. It's takes place in a place called Mythhatton, with places like Monster Square Garden, the Lower Beast Side, Grand Cyclops Station, Centaur Park, Staten Island Ferry, get it? So it's like a mythical themed New York. This honestly just appeals to me on a really personal basis. I don't think it's necessarily an amazing book or anything, but I just get a kick out of the idea of really like huge size differences between people living in the same society. I think that came for me, that started with like Richard Scarry's Busy Little World, where you've got like the worm and then the hippo, and they're like huge and small, but then they share the same society, and like society has to accommodate them both. I find that really a really compelling concept. So here we've got this world where all these mythical creatures live together. So there's like fairies who are tiny. Actually, the fairies are more like people size. But the main character is a giant and is raised by fairies. So they've got their enormous baby who gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Here she is in her class photo, and I just find that kind of, that's the thing that I'm into, is these like this idea of a giant baby like eating everything in the hot dog cart at once and not being able to get under the bridge with the rest of her Girl Scout troop. I just find those little scenes cute. It's a pretty standard story. Other than that, she feels left out, and she can't do anything right because she's too big for everything, and so she runs off in the woods to cry, and then she meets a dragon who's the same big size as her, and they save the day together. Yay. Kind of like stylish, bright but vintage style illustrations, charming enough. Not huge on the story, just hit a point of interest for me. I like borrowers, and I guess I like giants too because it makes humans the borrowers or something. Okay, this book is called Something Beautiful. This is another one by Sharon Dennis Wyeth, illustrated by Chris K. Centpete? How do you want to pronounce that? You go ahead and pronounce it however you want. I'm not trying again. This book is nice because it's a short book and it's just simple and quite charming. It's that super realistic style that I'm not particularly fond of aesthetically, but I understand why it was used for this, because the setting is sort of serious and dark, and I think it needs to be depicted realistically in order to come across as both accurate and respectful. This girl lives in kind of a rundown area where there's trash all over her house. Somebody's written "die" on her door, and this depiction of a homeless woman that lives next door to her, and she's just kind of like walking around. Here's this dangerous alley she's told not to linger in. She's kind of walking around feeling afraid of her world or sad about aspects of her world and feeling like there's not a lot of beautiful stuff in her world, but needing something beautiful in her world. So she, and this is kind of a standard, I've seen this type of kids book before. She goes around in her neighborhood and talks to the people in her community about what they find beautiful. This woman's chicken sandwich is beautiful, and these kids have like cool shoes and a nice jump rope, and etc. And so she kind of comes to appreciate her community with all these little details that really connect to the people. And I think they do a pretty good job in this story of communicating the real character in these people, even though they really only have like a sentence or two each, because it just feels relatable. It feels like real to life. And she, of course, in the end, she scrubs the word "die" off of her porch and got a little hopeful ending. And her mom says her beautiful thing is her. So it's sweet. It's to the point. It has a nice focus on a small community, and it speaks about the reality of some areas being underserved without, without like demonizing the people or anything that live there. Just kind of showing how people live there, and that's how it is, and they're making the most of it. And that's like the child's perspective, and I think that's appropriate. So it's good. Okay, this one is Squashed in the Middle by Elizabeth Winthrop and Pat Cummings. I assume one of those is the illustrator. Yeah, Pat Cummings is the illustrator. I like this book. This is my third favorite today. I like this book because I really felt emotionally invested in it, and I don't know how they achieved that particularly, but it probably just the writing. I felt really emotionally invested. This is about a girl who lives in a big family whose family dynamics are such that nobody ever listens to what she says, and in fact, they speak for her all the time. They describe it as speaking over her. I don't think they say speak for her, do they? They talk to Daisy, they talked about Daisy, and they talked right over Daisy's head. That's how they put it. But what they're doing is they're speaking for her. When other people ask questions to Daisy, the family answers and doesn't let Daisy answer, and then they just tell everybody that Daisy's really quiet, but she's trying to talk, just nobody's listening to her. That just really immediately grabs me emotionally. I kind of know what that feels like to some extent, and I think most people know what that feels like. Most people have had that experience, maybe not as regularly as this character. I haven't had it as regularly as this character, but I still have had that experience enough to understand it. And I think anybody who's experienced it knows how infuriating it can be. And it's also, as a teacher, something that I actually see quite frequently happening around little kids, where usually parents will answer a question for the child, like the teacher will ask the child a question and the parent will answer for it. And sometimes teachers will also answer a question for the child. I don't know what that is. It's like an assumption that the child won't have the courage to answer or something. We should always be quiet and let the child speak. So that's something I care about. And so then they proceed to have all these examples that drive home this concept of them talking over her, and it's just you start getting really emotionally anxious, oh my god, this is driving me nuts. You really feel for this character. She wants to spend the night at her friend's house, but all of the parents say oh, she wouldn't be into that, but then she she's it starts to get to her. She's like, maybe I wouldn't, I don't know. And she runs into the closet, but their friend brings her out and says, if you want to come, let's come. She tries to tell her family that she's going to her friend's house, but they won't listen, so she just goes. And then they come over to the house and are like, where were you? We looked everywhere. And she was like, we're talking. I told you that that we were coming to the house, and you just didn't listen. And so it's this whole conflict. It comes to a head. And then Daisy's sister says, we came to take you home. And she shouts, I'm not going home. I'm spending the night here. And she shouts, I won't get homesick. And her brother says, stop shouting. And Daisy said, I have to shout. And this moment is just, it's a really great release. It's like sets up all this tension where you're like really feeling like angry on behalf of this character. And then when she shouts at her family so that they finally listen to her, it's really satisfying. It's a big relief. And emotionally, I was totally invested in this. Things kind of get better for her after that. And I thought that was well done. I liked it. Okay, this one is My Bison by Gaia Wisniewski. Wisniewski? I don't know how to pronounce that. This book has this interesting art style that's very muted and toned down. The main thing I like about the art style, to be honest, is the placement of the text. I like all the white space. I really like this page. I think that book just looks so pretty with the little tiny text at the top and the big white page. Aside from being stylistically pleasing to me, it also kind of communicates this like cold, still, empty landscape that this takes place in. I think it takes place like on the edge of a forest somewhere, kind of remote and rural and in the snow at least half the year. It's about this girl who, as a child, feeds this bison. And when I first started out, I don't know, I was like so-so on this. It didn't grab me right away. But then the bison leaves and then it returns. And that's when the story starts getting more interesting. First of all, there's some weird moments where they very much humanize the bison. And it started to make me laugh. We settled down by the fire. My bison listened with tenderness as I told him stories. Suddenly they weren't anthropomorphizing the bison before, but now they are. I told him stories about the forest I loved and all the things I'd done while he was gone. Sometimes he wouldn't say anything. I loved his silence. I thought that was a really sweet statement, especially with this adorable, super goofy-looking, cute giant bison in a little bed alcove. So that was really charming to me. And that's at that page I started to be like, okay, I'm down with this. And then pretty quickly, what it does is it progresses to the fact that they're really old, and then that ends up being sort of the like closing like moral of the story, if there is one, is that suddenly they're really old, and the bison hasn't necessarily noticed, but she has, and they've been, I guess, they've spent their whole life together, and the woman reminiscence as an old lady, she reminisces about all of those old things and how she misses her mother, who I guess has died. She just says that she misses her mother. I don't know why her mother's gone. And she says, and you, my bison, do you remember your mother? Her sweet smell and snuggling her soft warm fur? I bet you miss her so much. Like, I don't know, I liked the way that she talks to this bison. It's just very charming. I can't put it any more than that. And then this is also a great line. Then one winter, my bison didn't come. I looked for him for a long time. In the forest, I felt like a little girl again. And I feel like that's supported by this picture where she's an old lady, but she's like a little tiny munchkin, just like she was when she was a kid. So yeah, it's just kind of charming. And, it wraps up with this sort of like, he was with me in my soul all along, even though he never came back, and that's a little bit trite, but overall, I found this a very charming, somber little book about friendship. I thought it was just cute. Okay, this last one is a book that I read a long time ago, not that long ago, about a year ago, and I got it again because I really, it stuck in my head. I wasn't sure how I felt about it at the time, but it really stuck in my head. It really makes me laugh. It's called Still Stuck by Shinsuke Yoshitake. I have read a few books by this guy, and it seems like they're all pretty darn great. So yeah, an author to look up and read the books of. This book's strength is just that it's hilarious, and I kind of want to buy it for my collection. So the boy is getting ready for his bath, and he gets stuck, and he remains like this for the rest of the story. So this is the character design for this kid, and it's just inherently cute and funny. But he imagines himself being stuck like this for the rest of his life, and the situations that entails are great. Him in front of the microphone. Here he is running through the hills, all stuck. Here he is wondering how he's gonna get a drink if he's thirsty, and then he's like, I'll figure something out. It's so funny to me. Like, I love the details of the, like, he put the shoulder blades and stuff in there, so it's, like, just detailed enough to give a real, like, sense of shape to these simplistic drawings, and it just makes the character come out so strongly. It's really hilarious. Here he is walking with his cat, and the person staring at him funny. This is probably my favorite illustration of the book, because he imagines finding somebody else who's stuck like him, and there they are running and chasing a butterfly together. Oh, So of course by the end, and here he is being like, I'm the king of the world, sort of. And by the end he gets unstuck, but like, man, as taking like a little moment in a child's life that I think every child has experienced and every person therefore has experienced, of getting stuck in your clothes when you're trying to take them off, and just spinning it into this like hilarious series of like riffs on the concept. It's just really appealing to me and really makes me laugh every time I read it. So great book, nice and cute and short. And that's all I got for this week. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.